Okay. Is everyone ready? So, 6:30, and I'll call this meeting of the Laconia Planning Board to order. Are we ready to go? Okay, so, good, because we're already on. Could you call the roll, please?
Jay Forrester,
Here.
David Broughton,
Here.
David Bounds,
Here.
Mike Delavecchio.
Here.
Claudia Marchese.
Here.
And Peter Burnett.
Here. And thank you, Kalina Graham, the recording secretary. And also at the table, we have Planning Director Dean Trefethan and Assistant Director Brandy Laughlin. We have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4 regular members, right? And are you guys both alternates?
I am.
You're an alternate.
I'm a regular.
You're a full member, okay. So we have a quorum present, and you'll be seated as well for this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me see here. Are there any objections to the acceptance of the minutes from last meeting? All that chance? No? Well, so we please note then that the meetings have, the minutes from the last meeting have been accepted. No presentations I see, or abstentions.
Correct.
And no continued public hearings, a novel idea. And we have number 9 on the agenda is a public hearing on Woodvale Ave. So what's up with that?
We're asking that you continue this to the September 5th meeting. We're still working issues with the applicant.
Okay.
So if you could take a vote to continue to September 5th, please.
All right, so do we have a motion to continue the application?
I make a motion, we continue to September.
So moved, second?
Second.
Okay, and that's, for the record, PL 2018-0075 CUP Woodvale Avenue. It's a proposal to level the lot with fill within the 50-foot wetland buffer, and we did get some materials, I think, for that already. So, any discussion on the motion? Sensing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it carries. What do we have next? Application acceptance. It looks like, according to the notes here, that the application on PL 2018-0072 SP 903 Union Avenue, the applicants requested a continuance to September 4th? Is that true? Okay. September 5th, is it?
Yes.
Yes.
Ah, throughout.
So if you could take a vote to do that, please.
Yes, could we have a motion to continue on that one?
Yeah, I make a motion that we continue that until September 5th at
And-
the applicant's request.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
And any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chair, just a note, both of those are actually September 4th, not the 5th.
Okay,
So you were right the first time.
Yes, you were.
right.
Are our notes different? Or they are?
I think that they updated it.
Oh, okay.
I get this stuff in red, that's my cheat sheet, and that's
All right.
always double check. This
That was my bad.
The Pentagon's official code.
Ah, okay.
So that's why we can do that.
So
Okay.
September 5th is a Wednesday?
It'll be the 4th.
Which is Tuesday.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it's gonna be the 4th, all
Tuesday.
right, all right.
It's almost always the first Tuesday of the month.
Right.
We sometimes for holidays have to move things around, like around the 4th of July. Okay,
Is this after, this is the day after Labor Day?
Day after Labor Day.
it's the day after Labor Day, right. And I won't be, I will be on vacation, so I will make sure to touch bases with the Vice Chair, Mr. Barnes, and make sure that he can cover. I mentioned it, I think, at the last meeting. Okay, so that brings us to PL 2018-0080 SU, New Hope Drive. It's a proposal for a conventional 22-lot subdivision. It was previously approved with an expiration in 2014. And I guess what we have before us is a waiver for updated plans. So if we could hear from the applicant, that would be great.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Patrick Wood of Patrick Wood Law Office, representing Donald and Frances Bossy. They're the owners of the property on New Hope Drive. This property was presented for subdivision approval back in 2004 and 5, and was approved by the planning board. We went through 2 appeals to the Supreme Court, and we finally got our final approval from the court in December of 2008. At that time, of course, the market was nowhere near what it was when we started this project. So it has been on hold since 2008. We reached an agreement with the planning office to record the plans that had been approved, with the understanding that the approvals were conditional upon getting the updated engineering information when they were prepared to start moving ahead with the project. So we're asking for a waiver of those subdivision plans. It's important to note that we got 2 variances back at the beginning of this. The first one was for the existing garage of Mr. and Mrs. Bossy, which would be within the setback from the proposed street for the New Hope Drive extension. And then subsequently, we got a variance from the zoning board to have the 22 lots that were under 2 acres in size and less than the required front footage. Those variances at that time, under the law, ran with the land, and they continue to do so. In 2013, the legislature amended the law that said variances and planning board approvals expired after 2 years if there wasn't some substantial development on the project. So we were fortunate in the sense that those were granted beforehand, and they are still valid, and that's our understanding from the planning office and their review from city attorney. That being the case, we're asking for a waiver of the plans because they've been recorded, but we understand that we need to update some of the engineering information, and there's been a change in your wetland setback requirements from 30 feet to 50 feet. So there will have to be a reanalysis of the wetland situation on the property and see whether the lots as configured will currently still fit within that new setback requirement.
You have any idea whether it will or not?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any idea whether it will or not? Is there an educated guess?
I'm not sure that I would say an educated guess, but I would say an experienced guess from my point of view. I've done a preliminary looking at the different lots and the setbacks, and I think we still have buildable area on the lots. But I have not, I'm not a wetland scientist, so I don't know whether the ground is different from what it looks like on the plans. From looking at the plans, there appears to be sufficient area, but that's something that will have to be determined by the experts.
So if it doesn't qualify, would that mean that the plan will have to be completely done over with less lots?
That's a possibility, that's right. And at that point, obviously, there would have to be a determination of the financial feasibility of the project.
So there's more at stake here than the cost of preparing new plans.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
But the key is the 22 lots with the reduced size, and whether it ends up being 20 or 21 lots. And one of those 22 is the house lot where the Bossies live right now. So 21 new lots, but we might end up with 19 new lots or maybe 20 new lots, depending upon what the wetlands analysis does. And the state approvals have to be updated, the engineering approvals, alteration of terrain permits have to be renewed. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And when we met at the TRC level a couple of weeks ago, the discussion was, well, how do we present this? And so my feeling was that we present it as a full application asking for the waiver on the plans with the understanding that the plans will probably have to be updated anyway, once we get the new engineering information and wetlands information. But in that interim couple of weeks, the planning staff, and they obviously can explain that, but our conversations have been such that this will be treated as a new application through the regular process of review, TRCs, et cetera, and the engineering data would have to come in during that time frame. So we're asking for a recognition of the fact that we've gone through a lot already, and we have something that we think is good for the city, but we understand that we need to make sure that it works from an engineering and a wetlands point of view. So the waiver is perhaps a conditional waiver, depending upon what the engineering data shows and the wetlands data shows. But we just wanted you to understand where we're coming from at this point, and the reason we didn't submit a full set of plans for this evening's meeting or the application, because we have already submitted all of those plans. They're on file with the city. We just need to update those plans.
So the only business before us is the waiver tonight. We're not
Well,
doing
there are
application
two
acceptance.
things.
Both?
Well, the acceptance.
Application acceptance.
Accepting the application. But in order to do that, we would have to rule on the waiver request? She's shaking her head no.
Well,
and
I
Dean's
think
just
that's
said
probably,
yes. I'm just gonna leave now.
I think that would be the safest thing. If you, in other words, we haven't met the strict criteria for an application.
Right.
And we're asking for a waiver of those strict criteria to allow us to submit the recorded plans. And that would be the waiver that we would be requesting. If you do
Okay.
accept that, then you can accept the
So
application.
You want to submit the plans that have already been approved
And recorded,
and recorded,
yes.
and
And which is a waiver from the usual application process, right? That's what we're
Correct.
waiving.
That's right.
Requirements for an application?
what part of the process, help me, what part of the process are we waiving?
At this stage, it is the planning staff's opinion and our recommendation to the board,
Well, I read your memo.
right, that all of the approvals previously granted have expired. So from our standpoint, that means there are no approved plans,
Okay,
okay?
so
So
the
If
waiver,
the way I understand this, and Mr. Woods can correct me if I'm wrong here, but he's asking you to waive the requirement of the updated plans at this moment, so he can essentially start the clock ticking,
Correct.
with the understanding, full understanding, that they are going to update the plans. And that's a slightly different way than what we were recommending in the memo
well, explain to me what the advantage to the applicant is
Yep.
for waiving the subdivision plans and starting, why can't we just table this, accept an incomplete application and table it? Does that start the clock? Because
No.
I'm reluctant to just waive the subdivision plans and rely on plans that go back to 2004, approved in what, 2007?
Yep.
I'm reluctant to do that. And I guess I just want a rationale on what the prejudice is to the applicant. I mean, I want this application to go forward. And don't get me wrong, I want to be proactive in terms of getting developers in here and helping them through the process. But I'm not sure what the advantage is, and it seems to me there's some kind of a disadvantage to the city and perhaps to the board with a waiver of subdivision plans. I'm happy to find a way to start the clock if that's what you want to do. But I don't want to accept subdivision plans that go back 14 years now.
I think that's a question you have to ask the applicant. I'm not aware enough of what the advantage is.
Okay, I'll ask the applicant. Do you understand the question?
Yes, we reached an agreement with the city.
Is that part of our materials?
Pardon me?
Is that part of our materials?
Yes, it should be part of the application. There was a conditional subdivision approval agreement that was entered into between the bosses and the city in 2012, and it was recorded in the
It's up on.
Belknap County Registry of Deeds in Book 2821, page 712. In that agreement, the understanding was between the bosses and the city that no construction of any of the proposed improvements shown on the plans shall be constructed until the engineering plans for those improvements are finalized, reviewed, and approved by the city of Laconia.
And when was that agreement?
2012.
2012. Let's see.
And I attached to the application information copies of the conditions or the letters from the various departments as to what those conditions were. So what our position is that we have an understanding with the city that the subdivision plans are acceptable, subject to modification to meet the engineering requirements that currently exist.
At that point, have there been any changes? When did the variance changes in the expiration dates? When did that take effect? 2013?
2013,
Okay, so you entered into this agreement prior to that change?
yes, right.
Do you have a copy of the agreement? Because I don't.
It's in the packet, I believe.
Should be in your package, Counselor?
I have an
So-
extra copy.
I'm not seeing it on here, but that doesn't.
Attorney Wood,
Yeah.
David, do you mind if I throw a question in here?
No, go ahead.
So, explain to me your interpretation of the statute. I noticed the wording is in the staff's memo and in your memos. The words were chosen pretty carefully. Your application says, at the time of the zoning board approval, the enabling statute for variances did not contain any time restrictions, and the general principle was that the variance ran with the land. Are you saying case law, or this, is it a matter of statutory interpretation? What?
Both case law and the statutory interpretation, the Supreme Court had previously issued, and I can't give you the citations right now, but that variances ran with the land, and that was the understanding.
Was that an issue that was previously litigated between the city and your applicant?
No,
So
no,
you
no.
said there were two Supreme Court appeals.
Well, those were on the planning approval. We received our initial approval,
Okay.
and one of the conditions was to obtain some final wetland approval, and the understanding was that that was basically a state requirement, that we're going to meet that. But the abutter appealed that, and after hearing and going to the Supreme Court remanded it to the planning board to make a final determination on that condition, which the planning board did. That got appealed again, went up to the Supreme Court, and as I say, in December of 2008, we got our final decision on it. And so that wasn't, the issue there was not the zoning approvals. Those had been decided before we went into the planning process. We had started the planning process, but we hadn't gotten into it in any depth before we got our zoning approvals. But the case law dealing with the life of a zoning approval was decided long before we got started on this. That was other cases in the state of New Hampshire.
So why were it says here the plans were recorded in 2012, December
2012.
28th. So you said you got the approval in 2008?
That was when we got the final okay from the Supreme Court. Then we came back to the planning board, and then we kept requesting continuances, and rather than continuing to ask for continuances, we negotiated this agreement with the city so that we would have an opportunity to at least record these plans and preserve the substantial effort that Mr. and Mrs. Bossy had gone through.
So the intent of recording the plans on December 28th, 2012, was to preserve the applicant's rights that the applicant believes that had vested, basically, in the planning process. No.
That was our intent. That was our hope. That's right.
That was the intent. of
That was the intent, right. Now, obviously, zoning approvals are different from planning board approvals. And the case law on planning board approvals was there had to be substantial improvement on the site in order to preserve those approvals. The zoning didn't have that requirement, zoning approvals. That's why I wanted some sort of an agreement that we didn't have to recreate everything when the economy turned around and Mr. and Mrs. Bossy could try to market this property.
Well, there wouldn't be an issue about you recreating everything. You could take the plans that you recorded back in 2012 and make modifications to those based upon the engineering and wetlands impact reports that you get, and then submit those as your plans, right?
Yes, we can do that. That's what we intend to do.
That's what your intention is to do. So why
Correct.
do you need a waiver, and what does it do for you? Because I'm reluctant to give a waiver.
What
I
it
don't want to
does,
get in the way, but I'm
No.
reluctant to give a waiver.
what it does for us is we have, for the first time in basically 10 years, someone who's interested in buying the property. And we need to get some understanding from the planning board that these general configurations of this property is going to be acceptable, and we don't have to start all over from getting all of our approvals. We need to get the existing approvals updated so that they're current, which may mean changes are needed in the plans. But we wanted you to understand where we are and try to get the process started on that level. As I said earlier, we weren't sure. The planning office wasn't sure how best to approach this. And so this was sort of, I thought, well, let's just put it on the table and see where it takes us. You know, as I say, we have a contract. It's conditional upon at least understanding that we can get the approximate 22 unit lots out of this. And so we're trying to make sure that we can preserve that contract if we can, so that Mr. and Mrs. Bossy can.
So what is the buyer, what kind of security do you give the buyer by us waiving the subdivision plans?
Well, the security is in that agreement. There can be no construction until all of the engineering data is approved. And that means we need to go through that process of updating all of that information. So we're not really, you're not really giving anything up. It's just an understanding that we're starting from a 22-lot subdivision. And we're not starting from zero. We're starting from that, which may get adjusted once we do all of the engineering. Is it unusual? Yes. But I'm known for those things.
I guess I have to agree with David.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. just go forward with what you have to do to get the approvals, and you're done. If they're approved, they're approved.
Right.
Because they meet the criteria of the wetlands and that, and you still have the 22 lot subdivision that David says just upgrade it. Why do you need a waiver to do that?
How about this?
The question is, the engineering costs of doing that. And the Bossies are not in a position themselves to do that. That's where the buyers have to come in. And what I want from, I guess, from you, and I'm getting the feeling of that, is some understanding that you all would accept the concept of the 22 lots, subject to getting the engineering that would support whether it's 22 or 21 or 20 lots, whatever.
Why can't we do this?
Pardon me?
Why can't we do this? Why can't we just acknowledge the subdivision that was recorded pursuant to the 2012 agreement? It looks like it was signed off on June 1 of 2012. Why can't we just acknowledge that that exists and that subdivision plan would have met the criteria at that point in time? Is that an accurate statement? Would have met a criteria at that point of time, and I don't know what else we need to start the clock, but I'm reluctant to waive anything, and when it's
Right.
not necessary.
And starting the clock has definite consequences. And so I'm certainly cognizant of what that means. And that clock is the 65 days from the date of acceptance, unless the...
Well, do you want that now? Don't you want more?
No, and I understand that. And I'm certainly, I don't want to put you in that position. That's not what I'm asking for.
All right.
And it may be that what we're getting to this evening is an informal understanding that the application, and I'm just thinking out loud here, if the application were not accepted this evening, because the plans needed to be updated, then maybe in September, we can have it back again for an acceptance of the application if we get the plans updated, or at least get some understanding on what those plans might be.
What does staff think of that suggestion?
Sorry.
All right, I think,
That's what happens
I
when
think-
lawyers think out loud. See what he said? I'm just thinking out loud, and that's what happens.
yeah, and I've got
Rattle,
to think
rattle.
out loud too here. I think you could go two ways here. The first way would be to approve the request to accept the application without, and waive the updated plans with the condition, as part of that motion, that updated plans will be produced and they will go through the TRC process and et cetera. If you waive the updated plans for this acceptance, it would only be acceptable to me if you had that contingency built into the motion, that, because we're viewing them as a good starting point, okay?
What's the other way?
The other way is to do two votes. The first vote would be to deny the waiver, and the second vote would be more of a policy type motion that says, in general, we're in support of this plan going forward with updated plans.
Well, this is what I wanted.
Both of those are okay.
This is my suggestion, and that is that we acknowledge the 2012 agreement that was recorded. We acknowledge that in 2012, those subdivision plans met the 2012 standards for acceptance. I'm just reluctant to waive anything because I don't think we need to do that. Table this to, or continue this until September, until, we can't do that?
I don't know how long this is gonna take. I mean, it could be before you in September, but probably, given the fact that most of the surveyors and engineering companies are straight out right now, that it
Well, we
could take
schedule-
longer.
We could schedule it for September, and if they needed longer, we could.
Well, what would you schedule? We don't, if you don't wanna vote for the waiver that accepts the application with the current plans,
Yeah.
okay? Then it's our opinion, there are no plans, because they've all expired.
Well, that's what I want to give the applicant the assurance of,
I
that
understand.
there are plans, and we know there are plans. We know there are plans that were submitted in 2012, and they were recorded pursuant to an agreement with the city of Laconia to accommodate both the possibility of future development, which the city of Laconia was interested in, and to accommodate the circumstances of the applicant at the time, to sort of preserve the status quo. So,
Can I just ask why it hasn't been developed?
The economy,
Got the approvals.
the economy, there was just
money, money,
No,
money,
no,
money, money,
nobody
money.
in a position to expend the money to do this.
I hear you, David.
Right. I mean, that's the honest truth. It wasn't economically feasible.
So now it's economically feasible because you've got a potential buyer.
That's right.
Who's interested in developing the property and wants some kind of assurance that the plans that were submitted back in
Right.
2012 are going to ultimately be given
That's right.
consideration with whatever alterations are necessary because of the change in the laws and the change in the
The regulations,
the
the ordinances,
regulations.
right.
So I'm more than willing to do that.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
that's,
think we
and
need
that's
to do.
basically all we can ask you for. I think at this point, I'm just trying to think, what do we do with this application? Can we table this for 2 months and come back to it? Is that
I'll table it
possible?
for however long you want.
If
I'll
it
take-
hasn't been accepted, it hasn't been accepted, so.
Well, I understand, but we've applied
Application
and,
acceptance table, we can do that.
Right.
We can table the application acceptance. I would suggest you do it for September. That's just my suggestion. If there's an issue that comes up, and there probably will be, we can just move it again to
Right.
October, and if it is an issue then, we can move it to November. That way you'll be on track
Right.
at the planning board every month.
Right.
And it'll be under review.
and the other question I have is, if we do that, Mr. Trefethan and Ms. Laughlin, will we be able to be on the TRC schedule, even if it isn't an accepted application?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Because you start on the TRC schedule even before you're accepted anyway.
right. That's right, we do. All right.
Yeah.
So we can still continue on the TRC schedule, which would allow us to be presenting information to the city engineers and the city officials as we go through the engineering and the planning process. That might be very helpful too,
Okay.
right?
So the 65 days is the agreement that they have in a purchase and sales agreement?
No, the 65 days is the state law. Once you accept the application, you have 65 days to approve it or deny it unless the applicant requests an extension or you get an extension from the city council. I don't want to put you under that time clock. That's not our desire at this point. Our desire is to to work with the city to try to get it updated and approved. That's our desire. And I don't want to put you under the gun.
And does the buyer have a contingency that he's only gonna wait so long and that's it?
It doesn't say that specifically in the contract, but there is a requirement that they need to have some assurance that they're going to get a certain number of lots. And so that's part of where we're starting with tonight. And so I think, I mean, you've bent over backwards for me this evening to allow me to present a lot of information, and I really, really appreciate that. So.
Go ahead.
So I want to be clear to the board, and I have it part of the record. The planning department is very much in favor of this project going forward. We do not foresee any major complications. We, as Attorney Woods has mentioned, the number of lots may be decreased by 1 or 2 because of what's going on with the wetlands and the increased buffers, but that is a known situation. They know it, the prospective buyers know it, and we know it. And so from that standpoint, you know, if you want to do some type of motion that is supportive of this continuing on, kind of you're approving of you know, a conceptual idea, or however you want to word it, that's fine. But I think we have a little bit of an issue if you do not grant the waiver for an updated plan. I don't see how you can accept the application.
We ask, is the application complete?
No, I'm just saying.
We ask the staff, is the application complete?
Right,
Absent the waiver, it would not be.
correct.
So I'm going to make a motion. Can I make a motion?
Oh, of course you may, Attorney Bow.
I think it could be.
Well, I don't want, somebody else might want to say something here. I don't know. So here's my motion. I'm going to do it just like I did before. I move that we acknowledge the subdivision plans that have been recorded in 2012 pursuant to the agreement between the city and the developer with respect to that matter, and that at that time, those application plans would have been considered complete if submitted to the planning board. In that acknowledgement, I want to recognize the staff's support of this application. I want to recognize that we're going to keep it on the TRC schedule for further development. And I'm going to move to continue the application acceptance until the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is September 4th, with the understanding that additional time may be necessary, and that at least this motion would consider the grant of additional time for substantially good reasons, a reason to continue it again. So my motion is to acknowledge the prior plans that were submitted, move to continue application acceptance until September 4th, and that's the essence of it, and I think that covers you.
It does.
Okay.
Is there a second to that stupendous motion?
I second it.
Seconded by Mr. Broden. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Sensing none, all those in favor, please signify your assent by raising your hand, please, so we have a recordation. And it looks like it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Again,
You're continuing it.
That's included, the waiver is included in that continuation?
You're continuing the waiver
Yeah,
request.
continuing, we
until-
request for a waiver.
Continuing the waiver request, yes,
All right.
indeed, that was, I think, the maker's intent.
Okay.
All right,
thank you
motion
very
carries.
much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Okay.
All right, so I see quite a few people here tonight. Were you folks all here for the one that we just did? Pretty much? Okay. This is not the public hearing on the application, just so you understand, so. Thank you for coming out anyway. It looks like we are at new business, is that correct? Appointment of planning board members and members at large to the CIP? All right.
So our CIP committee is made up of 3 members of the city council, 3 members of the planning board, and 4 members of the public. As of this date, we only have 1 member of the public who is interested, so if anyone is watching, or if you all know anyone who might be interested, have them let the planning department know. That being said, the member of the public who is interested is Ava Doyle. She was city councilor for a long time.
Yep.
And she served on the CIP as a city councilor. So if the planning board, she was not able to be here tonight, but if the planning board is willing to do so, if you could officially appoint her, that would be great.
So we're shy 2 public members?
3 public members,
Can we draft any of the people that are here?
if they're interested.
Yeah, I appoint that guy.
We did have a longtime member, Paul Lambert, who is unable to participate this year. I believe he is moving to Florida, so unfortunately we've lost some experience there. But if the planning board would please appoint 3 members of the board, as well as Ms. Doyle as a member of the public tonight, that would be great. And in the meantime, if we can come up with anyone else who's interested, we can have you appoint them at the September meeting.
Who's on the current planning board members? Who are those?
The planning board members last year were Bill,
Yeah,
Gail.
yeah.
No, did Gail do it last year?
No.
No. No, Gail didn't do it last year. She did for a number of years. Bill, Edwin, and I don't recall who the third
Was it
person
Lamani?
was. I apologize. Who?
Was it Lamani?
I think we
I don't
had some
Mike
dis-
did it.
Discussion about this at the tail end of the last
We
meeting.
did, yeah. So
Who were the volunteers that from the current board that were interested?
We had 2 people for the master plan steering committee,
Right,
which was Mr. St. Clair and Sarah.
right. But we didn't discuss CAP then,
did not,
apparently not.
and the members don't have to be full members. They can be alternates or ex officios. It's not specific.
For those of you that don't know, that we're talking about the capital improvements plan. Every year, the city, the departments come and they make a presentation to this committee as to what they believe their needs are for capital items, budget items. We listen to that, their presentations, reviews, other information the staff provides, and then the committee ranks them, basically, as to what is it by department ranking or overall?
It's there are scoring criteria,
Right,
and those are
It's not
added up,
arbitrary, right.
and they get ranked everything all together,
Yeah,
everything
so-
against each other.
so, and then it's advisory, obviously, because it's the city council that actually does make the sausages, as they say, and they have to do the final budget. But we can tell them, we can inform the council what we think, what that committee thinks is in the best interest of the city. So
Is this, I thought we've already done this.
every year, it's
You
done.
do it yearly?
Yeah.
Things change that quickly?
Well, there's a budget every year. So,
It's a,
and they have to know, how much the fire department really wants that fire truck. And there may be data presented as to the need for, I'm just using fire truck as an example. We've consulted certain actuarial tables, and if we had this kind of equipment located at this station, then the response times would be X, and it would lower, it could conceivably lower people's fire insurance premiums, or, it can be very technical, or it can be just, boy, we've always really, really wanted this. Can we please have it this year? So, and Public Works usually, they come in with the street projects and stuff
Oh, yeah,
too,
you
right?
see equipment purchases, road repairs, building upgrades, vehicle purchases,
How
you know.
often does this
Is
committee
Edward
meet?
willing to continue on the CIP committee?
I'd really like him to do so, actually.
The committee meets once a week for about a month, where you'll look at the projects that are presented, and then there are 2 weeks in a row where you have the departments give presentations. So police and fire and DPW and water, they'll all come in and go over their requests with you in case you have questions, or to really highlight the big asks and the whys, or the
Right.
projects. Sometimes they'll highlight projects in the past that have been funded and kind of, so you can see where the money went, that kind of thing. So
This time is once a year? or-
it's so the meetings are mostly in September and October.
Right.
Okay.
And then you have score sheets and you turn them in to staff and you guys tally on them, I think, right?
Correct.
And
they're
then,
presented to the city council.
Right.
In order of where they came in on the,
in time for the budget cycle, which kicks off when, in January, right, or December?
So usually by the December planning board, the scores are
February, March.
calculated, the rankings are all done.
Right.
And the chairman presents those to the board. The board then discusses them, and they can recommend that they go to city council as is, or they can kind of shuffle stuff around
What's
for
the story
whatever
with Bill?
reason.
does he want reappointment to the CIP? Is he?
Unknown.
If the board is not ready at this point to make planning board appointments, what I can do is send the schedule to everyone. Whoever's interested can email us, and we can do appointments in September. That's the last possible time, because the first meeting, I think, is the 19th
Well,
or 18th.
we know Edwin will do it, right? So who was the second person? Why won't they do it? And is there
David, how do you know Edwin will do it?
I just asked.
He will? Okay. So Edwin will do it.
How do you know that?
Because you told me that he said, that's double hearsay.
Okay, so who was the third?
I can't
We
recall.
can't remember.
Can't
I didn't bring my
remember?
files with
Whoever
me.
it was, they're no longer on the board.
Is there any, they're no longer on the board?
Correct.
Is there
the
anybody
gentleman that
sitting
passed
here
away?
who will do the capital improvements?
If I could see the schedule, I would consider it.
You would
Same
consider
here.
it?
I just need to look
Claudia-
at
If I could see the
Claudia would
schedule,
like
I
to.
travel a lot, so if I
was-
can make it, I
need to
will.
look at the schedule first.
Yeah, what
because he
happens
doesn't
in
interfere
his
with
case or
Okay.
my
Okay.
case, you miss a meeting.
It's not the end of the world if you miss a meeting. We can get you the information. If you miss a presentation meeting, that is a little, you miss an opportunity to
4
ask
weeks in a
questions.
row?
It's
Usually?
about that, yeah.
But it's no longer than October or November.
September and October generally.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna make this easy.
November.
I move to appoint Ava
Thank you.
Doyle as a member at large to the CIP committee at this point in time. She's indicated, can we do that?
Yep.
Okay, I make that motion.
A second.
Okay.
All right, made by Valens and seconded by,
So is that the 3 people
Claudia.
that you need now?
I'm trying to get your last
Is
name
that the
right.
3 people you need now?
No, that's just the member at large from the public, so you
That's
guys
the
need to
public.
vote
Oh,
on that.
okay.
So, and then we're gonna table, then we're gonna go to September 5th. We're gonna find out who wants to do this, whose schedules are accommodated. It looks like we're looking for 2 members.
That's
We
fine.
got one, Edward now, and we need 2 more. And there's at least 2 or 3 people who would be considerate, depending upon your schedules. And
Yeah, I just want to make sure that if I had to miss a meeting, I might have to go to Florida again for another week, so it may be in September, but I'm not sure.
All right.
I hate it when that
What I
happens.
will do is I will send the email to the board. If you look at the schedule and you are interested, please email me back so that at the next meeting, I can just say, these are the people who want to do it, please nominate them and vote.
Okay.
Excellent, that's a great idea. But we do have a motion pending to appoint Ava Doyle as a member at large to the CIP. Any further discussion about that? No, all right. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? And it's,
So in addition to
Unanimous.
the 3 board members that we're looking for, we still need 3
3 members at large.
3 members at large,
Public,
and
so-
maybe we could get that out.
about
So you folks
your-
out there
your
in
best
TV
friends.
land,
Your best friends and how to get rid of them.
now is the time to come to the aid of your city.
Okay.
And it's not on the agenda, but I know we did, again, we talked about the Lakes Region Planning Commission. There was a vacancy or vacancies
there is.
There
there.
are, yep.
So maybe you could include that in your memo that goes out and say, hey, look, we need to fill these
Okay.
slots. And the steering committee for the master plan now.
We still need one more person from the planning board.
All right,
Or confirm that Bill is gonna do it, but
I would be happy to do that.
okay.
I was gonna suggest you do that. That's the committee with the council and with the members at large,
Right.
Yes,
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. And
We
is
gotta get another meeting going.
Yep, yes, sir.
former Chair Dion on that list still, I believe? Did we get his name in there?
No.
Wasn't he on the master plan
Yes.
steering committee?
Correct.
I know from a conversation with him that he's willing to continue. Does that,
Okay,
Who?
that's fine.
Gary Dion?
Is this the same committee that we met on with the city council and everything? Because he wasn't
Yes.
on that committee.
No, he was not, no, sorry, I
He
misunderstood.
wasn't
No.
on that committee.
The master plan steering committee?
Yes,
Okay. He wasn't previously on that,
correct.
okay. And is there a public seat, or a chair?
There is,
We
it
should have
was,
two.
Reuben Bassett was the
Yeah.
member of
Does
the
it-
public.
Does that have to go through the normal application process and all that?
He's still on the committee if he unless he wants out.
Right, yeah.
My
I mean, I
understanding.
think we took care of that last month when we did, Sarah and,
Yes.
and Charlie onto the
So
master plan
the
steering.
committee now is going to be the mayor, Councilor Lippman, me, the chairman of the planning board, Sarah and Charlie, Reuben Bassett, and we should have one other member of the public. So I
And
forget
that's-
who we had before, it was somebody. I'm old and senile and I forget.
That was it.
That was it?
I would, again, I've spoken with Gary, and he has indicated a willingness to serve on that committee,
Okay.
so.
All right.
He is a former chair of this board. He served as a chair when I was last on the board back in 2000s. And,
I'm not sure that we have an opening, but maybe we can add another person from the public, so I'll check on that.
okay,
Check on that and let's see, and let's get another meeting scheduled.
Yes, yes, sir.
all right. So we don't need a motion or anything on that.
Correct.
All right. Is there a planning department report?
No, I think we've given you enough for tonight.
All right. So I seem to have run out of agenda. Do you guys have any more?
I do.
What do you have, sir?
I want to bring up this one point of order, and I think it's important. Because at our last meeting, when we considered Langley Cove, you didn't vote.
Right.
And I just want to know, I want you to know as a I'm not invested in you voting or not voting, but this is not like the city council. You're not allowed, you don't sit in the position of the mayor. You have a vote on everything that comes before the board. You can vote. Yeah,
I
on it.
understand that. Should
Okay.
perhaps my policy would be to only vote if it's necessary to break a tie.
I'm not
So
telling,
that
I'm not asking you to make a decision about it. I'm not saying you should do it one way or the other. I just want to make sure that
But
you're.
it does occur to me that, given the fact that that's not codified anywhere, then perhaps I should just abstain for the record if I don't vote? Or would it just be easier for everybody if I just voted?
Be easier for me if you voted, but I'm not advocating that you vote.
Okay,
think-
fine.
Be comfortable.
I
I don't know that there's a
I'm
legal
not.
reason for him not
I haven't
to
lost my faith
Oh, there is-
in humanity. I just thought it was an appropriate thing for me to do
I
as
think,
chair.
I think it would
So
be,
that it,
I think it would be cleaner if you did vote.
okay,
I mean, you're chairman from the standpoint of running the meetings, but other than that, you're equal to everyone else.
what about abstaining from making motions? I think that's appropriate under Robert's rules, right?
Under most circumstances, I would agree with that. Occasionally, there are exceptional things
'Cause I
that may
can always
require
just-
the chair to make a motion.
Send somebody an email. Do it.
Well, you can just suggest a motion that
I
might be
could
made.
suggest that a motion be made.
Yeah.
For example, like a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Oh, no, we haven't got a motion yet. I was just
Oh.
suggesting.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion.
She's jumping the gun
I
here.
am.
So you've made the motion. Would someone
Yeah.
care to second
My
Claudia's
bad.
motion to adjourn?
I'll second it.
And is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes, it's 7:25.
Sensing
Let's go
none.
home.
This will be a record. This will be a record.
I would like to vote in favor of that motion. Is there any objection?
No.
It's unanimous. So first truly unanimous vote.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I'll get better at this, I promise.